Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to talk about the 10th anniversary of caste-led operation in Gaza in 2008-2009, known as the caste-led operation by Israel. My name is Yousef Aljamal. I am from Aki village in occupied Palestine. I grew up in Nusayrat refugee camp in Gaza. I am speaking to you from Turkey, where I am doing my graduate studies. As many of you already know, the offensive in 2008-2009 resulted in the murder of 1,500 Palestinians and the injury of 5,000 others, including the murder of 308 children. I will just give you an introduction. Some statistics that will help you contextualize what happened in 2008-2009 in Gaza. So according to the UN, 3,540 housing units were completely destroyed, and almost 2,800 sustained severe damage. Some 20,000 people were made homeless by Israel, and 268 private businesses were destroyed. Another 432 were damaged. 18 schools, including 8 kindergartens, were destroyed, and at least 262 others were damaged. Today, we are here to talk about what Israel calls caste-led operation, what Palestinians called the 2008 massacre. But we are also here to talk about Palestinian culture, to celebrate Palestinian culture and literature and food. As you see in the background, I have the map of Palestine here, which represents the different embroidery patterns of Palestinian cities and villages, which Palestinian women wear, the traditional Palestinian dress known as the thob. We are here to stress our culture and food. We are here to tell the Haaretz newspaper that claims that shawarma is an Israeli food, that is a Palestinian food, because this is equally important. Israel is waging offensives one after another against Gaza to erase us as Palestinians and to erase our culture and food and literature as well. As you see in the background as well, I have the poster of Gaza Writes Back, which is a collection of short stories published by Just Word Books and edited by my friend Rifat Al-Arir. I would like to start my speech by quoting Rifat in his book, in which he says, "To Palestine, to Gaza, and despite Israel's death sentences, like lead cast upon the head, gnawing at our life, clinging to it like a flea to a kitten, and stuffed in our throats, the moment we say Amen to the prayers of old women and men, looking their ways to God, we dream, we pray, clinging to life even harder. Every time a dear one's life is forcibly rooted up, we live, we do." I would like also to start by a very nice creation by Ibrahim Nasrallah, a Palestinian novelist, in his famous novel, The Time of White Horses, in which he says, "After all these years under occupation, we are still beautiful, as if we live above occupation, not under it." So this shows, the Palestinian spirit of sumud, steadfastness, and resilience. So after this introduction, which helped us contextualize what happened 10 years ago in Gaza, I will jump to questions that we received by email. So the first question was about, the differences in attacks that, between the 2008, 2012, and the 2014 offensives on Gaza, and how the Gaza population coped with each one, and what is happening to resilience in the face of this level of repeated trauma. the question says. So in answer to this question, I think what makes the 2008-2009 offensive unique was the fact that it was about shock. So it shocked the Palestinian population in Gaza because it was the first of its kind. I never, my generation never experienced something like that before. The number of people who were killed was shocking. The way Israel carried out the attack on Saturday, which is a holy day for Jews, the Jewish Shabbat was also remarkable. The number of facilities attacked at the same time, 11:27 a.m. in the morning. It was Saturday. I still remember this very well. So it was my first experience, my generation's first experience in terms of numbers, the way the attack was launched. While in 2012, the offensive was about defiance. So because of the changes we have seen in the Arab world following what was called by then the Arab Spring, and how there was a change in leadership in some Arab countries, especially in Egypt. So Palestinians felt empowered in a way or another, that they had they needed support, and the fact that Israel assassinated one of Hamas top leaders in Gaza, then Hamas retaliated by firing homemade projectiles into Israel's capital, Tel Aviv, for the first time ever, to do this from Gaza, from a Palestinian territory. So there was this sense of, being victorious. And then, the experience of Palestinians in 2008, 2009 helped them again in 2012 to cope. So they had more experience, how to, for example, when there is food shortages or bread shortages, how to deal with that, how to help each other under, bombing and killing. In 2014, I was not in Gaza, so I cannot speak of a direct experience, but based on my observation and, asking my friends, and upon returning back to Gaza in 2015 and listening to the many stories of my friends and relatives, the offensive was huge at all levels compared to 2012. 2012 only lasted for 1 week, and again, it was much larger than 2008, 2009 as well. In terms of the people killed, people were killed in masses. And Israel tried to push them out of their houses. So Israel was trying to displace them, to kick them out of their houses, out of their neighborhoods. But Palestinians were strong and resilient. So Palestinians learned from their experiences in 2012, 2008, and decided never to leave their houses, even if this meant that they would die inside these houses. So again, there was more killing in 2014, more destruction compared to 2008, 2012. In fact, the destruction was way larger and bigger than both offensives altogether. So in terms of resilience is always there. We are strong. Israel cannot break our will. And as our Irish brothers and sisters say, our day will come. So resilience is always there. Again, so we have here another question. How the destruction of Gaza infrastructure and economy, and with the high unemployment rates, especially among young people, is there like a brain drain among college students, educated people? The answer is unfortunately yes. A lot of my friends left Gaza. Some of them left Gaza to seek education and professional development, but this is just one side of the story. So we have also people who plan to return back upon finishing their education. They wanted to make use of what they described as, a waste time in Gaza, because there is nothing to do these days in Gaza, according to them. So they tried to seek education and professional development. But even with the increasing number of young people leaving Gaza, when I view this issue, I view it differently. I think we need advocates for Palestine among Palestinians everywhere. And many of these people who leave Gaza serve as ambassadors for Palestine in Europe, the US, or elsewhere, wherever they go. They speak of their own experience being in Gaza, experiencing all these, offensives on Gaza, first-hand experiences that many people should listen to. We have another question here. Yeah, the possible resolution of the Hamas-Fatah impasse, particularly after Abbas dies. I think the main problem Palestinians are suffering from is the implications of the Oslo Accords, which made Palestinians face each other instead of facing the Israeli occupation. And for any deal to be successful between Palestinians, I think whatever happened after the Oslo Accords and the results of the outcomes of the Oslo Accords has to be dealt with. Oslo has to be dismantled as a process. We got nothing from Oslo. We only got vision. Israel expanded its settlements. It's creating apartheid walls and roads as well in the West Bank, bringing more settlers in Gaza. It's besieging the people of Gaza. We have siege now for 12 years. So what we need to do is to dismantle the Oslo process as a whole, and then to have general elections, that represent Palestinians, regardless of where they are, including Palestinians in the diaspora. We need to sort of give new blood to our leadership and to have a representation for all sectors of the society, all Palestinians, regardless of what they think of or where they live, as I said. And any resolution that doesn't include these elements, I think, will eventually fail. So we have to include these elements. We have to dismantle the whole Oslo process, and then to have elections. And once we have a good representation, we can speak to the world. There is another question here. Okay, so the situation of healthcare system or non-system after 3 major attacks on civilian infrastructure and the recent defunding of UNRWA. So in 2007, my sister was in need for a minor surgery, but due to the lack of medical equipment in Gaza needed for the surgery, she had to be referred to a hospital outside Gaza, and Israel denied her a permit, and she kept waiting, and her health situation kept getting worse, and eventually she left to Cairo, but it was too late, and she lost her life in Cairo as a result of not having the surgery on time. However, it was a minor issue. This was in 2007. So you can imagine how the health sector in Gaza is today after, as you mentioned, 3 Israeli attacks, major attacks. Today, the health system or non-system, as you put it, is collapsing. It has been collapsing, but thanks to the resilience and support of the Palestinian people, it has not completely collapsed yet. Gaza's hospitals ran out of critically needed drugs for many chronic diseases. According to the Ministry of Health in Gaza, electricity outages affect the operation of Gaza's hospitals. Gaza is always in need for fuel, which run generators that run hospitals. And this put the lives of patients at risk always. Gaza lacks 50% of cancer drugs, for example, 72% of first aid drugs and medicines, especially drugs needed for diabetes, blood pressure, while 61% of the drugs needed for inherited diseases are no longer on the shelves of the Ministry of Health. In other words, the health sector is collapsing. For a long time, companies working at Gaza's hospitals, for example, cleaning companies or food, companies that provide food for patients, they have been on a strike because they did not receive their salaries for sometimes 3 or 4 months. You could imagine, when the cleaning teams stop working, what would happen at Gaza's hospitals, in addition to the lack of fuel and medicine, which is a totally different catastrophe. As for UNRWA, UNRWA said if the deficit in its budget continue, it will close some clinics in Gaza, as well as in other parts of Palestine and even refugee camps elsewhere in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan. And it would terminate the contract of many of its staff, reduce medical services only to chronic diseases. So they will have this will have a direct impact on Palestinians in Gaza and elsewhere, especially Palestinian refugees. There is a question here about the impact of caste-led and subsequent wars on Hamas. Okay, so every time Israel launches an attack or an offensive on Gaza, it says it aims to eradicate Hamas and destroy its network of tunnels and homemade projectiles. But all offensives ended up with Hamas sending the last homemade projectile into Israel. Israel destroys some tunnels here and there belonging to Hamas and other Palestinian factions as well, kill dozens of hundreds of Hamas members and members of other Palestinian armed groups, but it never was able to defeat Hamas and other Palestinian factions, as we see. In fact, we have seen how Hamas fighters were able to inflict much damage to Israeli soldiers at Gaza's fence during the 2014 offensive. Israel, to conclude, Israel is good at one thing: destroying houses, murdering entire families, and causing damage to the civilian population. We have seen how the majority of victims on the Palestinian sides were civilians, while the majority of Israelis killed by Palestinians were soldiers. Okay, another question. Can you share one or two of your most vivid memories of caste-led? Okay, so whenever you ask a Palestinian from Gaza about the most vivid experience of caste-led operation, the first thing that comes to mind is the moment the offensive started. So I was studying for a final exam. It was a Saturday, as I said, 27th of December 2008, and I had an exam at the Islamic University of Gaza, and I decided to take a break. Exactly at 11:27 a.m. the offensive started, and I started hearing bombing everywhere, as if hell broke out. So I thought maybe they targeted a place here or there, a building here or there, and as the news started spreading, and people went out to the streets to see what happened, and they started calling their beloved ones. People in Gaza realized that the attack or the offensive was carried out at the same time and targeted dozens of governmental buildings, police stations, and different facilities. So it was not one building or one police station. We're talking about dozens at the same time, which resulted in the killing of more than 200 people. Most of them were police officers. The attack took place when kids were coming back from school. It took Palestinians in Gaza a while to realize what actually was happening. Everyone thought that Israeli forces targeted one specific building, as I said, but later in the day, they learned that Israel targeted most governmental buildings at the same time. So this is one vivid memory that I have, and every single one in Gaza has, about the attack and the moment it started and the shock we had, the confusion, not knowing what actually happened. The second most vivid memory I have, so there is a police station to the east of my refugee camp, Nusayrat refugee camp, called Abu Mudain police station, located at Salah ad-Din Street to the east of my refugee camp. And one of my distant cousins named Ibrahim Aljamal was reported missing under the rubble of the police station. So the family kept looking for him until sunset. We found him finally, and it took us a while to make sure it was him because his head was separated from his body. So this is the one of the vivid memories I have, painful memories I have of Cast Lead. There is a related question here. Sorry, what effect did you see Cast Lead have on your family and friends? Okay, as I mentioned, my distant cousin was killed, and two of my neighbors were killed as well. One of them is named Ahmed Al-Tawil. He was 8 years old. So Ahmed's family used to live next to a mosque in my neighborhood, and there was a rumor in the neighborhood that Israel will target the mosque because Israel targeted many mosques during its different offensives on Gaza. So the family evacuated the house and they went to their uncle's house. So Ahmed was playing football at the time when an Israeli F-16 targeted the area where he was playing, and he was killed as a result. So he escaped from his fate to his fate. He escaped from death to death. Another civil defense employee who happened to be my neighbor as well was killed. His name was Muhammad Al-Qatrawi. Actually, on the first day of the bombing, I counted some 35, 40 people who I knew who were killed. And then I lost counting afterwards. So the shock again was very strong, and it took us a while to recover and realize what happened. I think this is the last question. Yeah, so I will look at the last question here and then have a quick look at the comments and see if you have questions. I'll try to answer them. So there is a question about the Great March of Return and how it can help Palestinians in Gaza and elsewhere get out of the difficult box they have been in for so many years. Does it help, yes or no, and how? I think the Great March of Return helps, Palestinians get out of this box, and it provides a very creative way of bringing the issue of Palestinian refugees back to the surface. Palestinians in Gaza, the majority of them are refugees, including myself, are telling the world that our issue is not about food or the many crises we had to deal with in Gaza. Our issue is about occupation, actually, and our right to go back to our towns and villages. The protest is peaceful, and it exposed the brutality of Israeli snipers who killed nearly 200 Palestinians in cold blood and injured some 20,000 others. Palestinians know this brutality very well, but it's time for people all over the world to see how Israeli snipers deal with unarmed Palestinian refugees who ask for their right to return to their towns and villages according to the UN Resolution 194. In fact, the recognition of Israel as a UN member was conditioned to its acceptance of Resolution 194, which Israel agreed to on paper and never allowed it to happen, never implemented. So after all these years in refugee camps, Palestinian refugees are taking the initiative to implement this UN resolution themselves. I will, yeah, so I think there are some comments here. What do you think of supporters of Palestinian rights in the West should do? I think one important thing to do by pro-Palestinians everywhere, whether they are in the West or not, is to support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. It's a call by the Palestinian civil society in 2005, which called on different civil society groups all over the world to implement a comprehensive campaign of boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel until it allows Palestinian refugees to go back to their towns and homes according to the UN Resolution 194, and until Israel dismantles the wall and settlements in the West Bank, and treat Palestinians who hold Israeli citizenship to full equality, because there is much discrimination against them. So if non-Palestinians want to help Palestinians, is to support this movement and to isolate Israel. And we have seen, in the previous year, how the BDS movement managed to achieve many successes, and that it's a very effective tool of practicing pressure against Israel at that time. The international community is doing nothing. So we as a civil society could do something by pressuring Israel and imposing boycott, divestment, and sanctions against it. We have seen many boycott initiatives. We have seen many divestment initiatives. And recently we have seen actually sanctions initiatives. For example, the bill passed by the Chilean Parliament as well as the Irish Parliament. So we have some good news, and we could do a lot in this regard. Okay, if you want to the right of return, how can you see that working out? Israel always says that there is no space for Palestinian refugees, which is a big lie. If you look at refugees in Gaza, the majority of them were forced to leave villages and towns, which are in some cases 1 kilometer away from where they are now, in refugee camps in miserable conditions in Gaza. While if you drive 10 minutes away, you will find modern Israeli cities and towns, paved roads, hospitals, infrastructure. And you see this discrimination and injustice happening in front of your eyes. And again, Israel claims that there's no space for Palestinian refugees. While if you look at the map of Palestine, you find that 80% of villages which were ethnically cleansed in 1948 are still empty. So it's not because there is no space. It's because Israel doesn't want Palestinians. Israel wants to get rid of Palestinians, those who are in 1948 Palestine, in Jerusalem, the West Bank, in Gaza. Israel has a problem with Palestinians. It's not an issue of space. Yeah, I think, yeah, there are no more questions. I will conclude. I would like to thank you a lot for joining us today. I would like to thank Just Word Educational, and I invite you all to visit their website, www.justwordeducational.org. If you have further questions, you could tag me on Twitter. My name is Yousef Aljamal, Yousef Aljamal, Aljamal, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you again. Until we meet in a free Palestine. Thank you.